Welcome everyone to the Data Splash podcast brought to you by Upriver. If you are a data engineer, a data leader, or just someone trying to make sense of what the hell is going on with AI and data right now, you are in the right place. Here with me today is Abe Gong. Hey Abe, great to have you here. Great was the CEO and co-founder of Great Expectation, the famous open source that everybody here using every day, I believe. So today we are going to talk about what is happening for data team and how they are managing their knowledge inside of the organization in order to really enable AI and automations through the whole organization. But before we jump in, we start with our little tradition, the 30-second splash. No time to think, just instinct. So, Abe, are you ready?
Think so. Let's go for it.
Let's go for it. Yes. Most overhyped phase in data right now.
Probably context graph. It's a good phrase. There's something real there, but it's also hugely overhyped.
Dream destination vacation.
My parents are taking me on a safari to Nairobi this summer, so call that a dream.
Will full stack data engineer be the most common data title in 2028?
Probably not. It's a good title, but probably not.
Thank you very much, Abe. So let's jump to business. First of all, if you can start with a short brief about you and how you arrived to the concept of knowledge bases inside organizations.
I'm not sure how short I can make it, so keep me on track here. But just giving you some of my background. I came up through data engineering and data science, starting my career like out of grad school in like 2012, like 10 years ago. And at that time, I kept getting hired to build data teams to build cool algorithms, and discovered everywhere I went that the actual problems were all on the engineering side. You had to get the supply chain for the data to work before you could do the algorithm stuff. So when you do that, partly from a technical perspective and also just like from a functional company building perspective, you end up thinking a lot about what are the things that people need to know in order to get their work done. Yeah, so that makes me fascinated with the concept of knowledge management, and it's a big part of what I'm working on now.
Yeah, amazing. So it's interesting that you came from like the downstream usage. You saw that you started with the algorithm and you suddenly understand that the real work is understanding what I already know right now before I can do some sophisticated algorithm. And I think this is exactly what people feel like now, that they are trying to leverage like very cool AI models, but then they remember that they need to explain the model what you have, what you know, and only then it can really get to work. So yeah, it's all garbage in, garbage out. And for an overall view, I think that this is one of the reasons that I am really excited to talk with you about, because today, I think every organization that I talk with understands that without really incorporate this knowledge of what is happening right now in the organization, what is the business, what is customers, what is the different departments that I have in the internal organization, using advanced model won't be really effective.
Mm-hmm.
And if companies really want to change the work and be what we call it like AI native, they have to first understand how they are building the internal knowledge base. And this is how I see that.
Yeah. Like I've seen so many teams that are trying to, for example, attach agents to a CRM. And then they realize, oh, we need to deduplicate our CRM first, right? Like otherwise we're going to end up sending, the wrong offers to the wrong people. There are a lot of horror stories about scaling up AI on that data that way.
Yeah. So how you define like a knowledge base?
I'm still fishing for like the really concise boiled down definition, but I think memory is a good place to start. I think in general, when you talk about a knowledge base, people think, well, it should kind of know all the things that you know. But I think memory gets complicated when you start thinking about the read and the write access patterns that you need from it. And what I mean by that is it's not just remembering what one person did or what one agent did. You're remembering across many different people, many different agents. And then ideally, you're not just keeping, a log of stuff. Like a log doesn't feel like a full knowledge base. There's some layer of curation there. There's some layer of extracting the important parts, understanding how they connect together, and then surfacing them in a way where they become more useful in the future.
Interesting. So I think that first of all, when I'm thinking about knowledge base, it is some kind of like database, not database in the traditional way, but some kind of a central storage that condense all the entities and relationship and their meaning inside the organization. Would you agree on like this very high level definition?
I would agree in an aspirational way. I think that you want a knowledge base to do that. But when I look around at the things that people are calling knowledge bases, you have, for example, like the giant SharePoint folder that has 15 years of documents in it. They're not very well organized. They're certainly not tied together in, a relational database type of way. In theory, they could be, but like it's a lot of work to get to that point. And then kind of at the other end of the spectrum, you have all these people running OpenClaw or Hermes or personal agents. And in that case, like the knowledge base is often like a wiki, right? It's like a folder that has a bunch of markdown files in it. And again, I don't think that that's the ideal knowledge base, but it's actually adequate for a lot of tasks.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm stretching the definition because I think it's useful to think about all of those things collectively as knowledge bases and then start to understand what operations are and aren't supported by different infrastructure.
Interesting. But I think that's something very intrigued that you said, that knowledge need to be curated. So we can call like a 50-year-old's drive with like thousands of document and knowledge base, but it's not really usable. And there is a lot of deduplication of like definition. Things change over time. So what is really interesting for me is to think about that like in the old analytics day, when you have all this raw data that was garbage. And then in order to really use that, you needed to curate that across all the, for example, the medallion architecture or classical data pipelines. So in that manner, from what I hear from you, it's basically kind of the same, but in a bit of a broader view, when it's not just tables, it's documents, it's things that claw gather from all around the environment and save in markdown files, sorry. And from that, you need to curate it, something that is really represent the ongoing business.
I think that's right. I would just push on the like, when you say you need to curate it, I just would say why. And for me, the why is in order to support certain operations, you need to curate it. So something like the giant SharePoint, like, does it support search? Yeah, you can search across it. How useful is search on its own? Not very, right? Like if you pull up a document from 10 years ago, do you still trust it? Is it still current? In order to make that judgment, you have to compare it with a bunch of other things and do a broader query, if you want to call it that. And so, yeah, just having the raw data in a place where you can search it is a start, but it definitely doesn't cover everything you want to do. So I'm starting to think of it in terms of a sliding scale of like, well, it's a sliding scale, but it's made up of discrete operations. Like which specific things can you do with this knowledge base? It gets more useful as you enable other functionality. And this thing we call curation, a lot of it is making it so that you can look in one place and be confident that that's the right answer without having to look in a lot of other places.
Yeah. So in the end, everything comes back to trust. When I'm getting piece of knowledge, how much can I trust it before I need to further investigate and like learn other things?
Yeah, I strongly agree on that.
We a bit touch on that, but let's do that like in a more like modern way. How do you see companies today manage their knowledge bases?
Not? I mean, every CIO has an information strategy, like a technology strategy and a knowledge management strategy. One of the things I think is really interesting is those are still largely separate in most places. I think forward-thinking organizations are starting to really engage with the idea of how do we, like, we've been storing stuff for a long time. How do we start curating that now? But yeah, actually, one of the reasons why I don't love the term context graph is I think it implies that problem is a strictly technical problem. And I think a lot of it comes down to how is it going to be used? Who's going to be looking at it? When are they going to need it? And unless you know those things, it's very hard to design a knowledge base that works really effectively. You can define the storage layer and some parts of the query layer for it, but I guess one microcosm of this is the whole semantic layers discussion that's going on in data teams. Like defining your semantic layer is fundamentally a business problem. The hard part is getting buy-in from around the organization. There's also a technical phase to it, but unless you can get people to agree on what's a useful definition, it doesn't matter how good your query is.
Yeah. Interesting.
You're interviewing me, but I would love to turn it around because you're seeing interesting stuff there too. Are you seeing something different from what I'm describing?
So I think it's evolving. So today, when you are not looking on knowledge bases, a traditional company look on unstructured and structured data separately. So you have all the unstructured data that company put it under some kind of a search. Usually it can be Glean or all the Gemini tools in a G Suite. And it's really not curated. People are trusting agents that will give them the right information when they need. And there is a need, as you said, to double check and validate that this is the right info. Sometimes it's work, sometimes it's not work. For sure, it's not something that you can act upon that automatically. In the structure side of things, I think that semantic layer is really catching for the first time because suddenly there is a broader organizational opportunity here. Because right now, semantic layer is not for only for analysts. Now every user in the organization can open a Claude Cowork and
Hmm.
talk with the data. So in that manner, in the first time, semantic has a broader meaning. So the buy-in to manage that properly is increasing. So I think this is why now is really starting to be implemented. And the last thing that I see in that manner, that the tools that we have right now, Claude, Codex, Cursor, really help us to incorporate this semantic or context or knowledge. I don't know. We need to decide on a name as an industry, I think.
As long as it's not context graph.
And I think that like the ability to create skills and really put all the context that I have in a markdown file, and this markdown file is really usable. It's something magical that really help us to federate our ability to create and collect this context from all around the organization.
Hmm.
So I will say shortly what I'm seeing right now. Search above your unstructured data, semantic layer starting to get traction, and people starting to use skills as a knowledge collector from all
Yeah.
around the business.
Yeah. Just riffing on that for a minute. The way you're laying out the landscape makes a lot of sense to me. And I think what I'm pointing at is even once you have search on the unstructured stuff, there's so much more you could do with it if you did curation. And um, I'm just kind of fascinated by the technical problems and the organizational problems, like the human social problems of how do you get that curation done. So anyway, there's a lot of what I was saying, I think would fall into that bucket. Observation on the other side, kind of an analogy. If you talk to folks doing software engineering, like really pushing hard on agentic engineering, everybody's talking about the bottleneck around review now, right? And how previously writing the code was the slow part. And then review, like you needed to review promptly, but like that wasn't the issue. Now that you can just like pour out lines and lines and lines of code, and they're often correct or mostly correct, suddenly review is the bottleneck, right? And there's a whole industry growing up of people trying to solve that. The way you describe kind of the value of the semantic layer strikes me as being sort of the same problem in reverse, but it's less of a problem. So like if you go back 5 years, 10 years, people talked about data democratization in organizations forever. And basically the issue was analysts were the bottleneck. You had to have kind of somebody to translate between the business need and how to actually query the database. And that really constrained how much you could get out of your data systems. And now agents are getting good enough that that bottleneck is being relieved. And so the whole notion of like fully democratized data access, it does not, there's still real challenges to it, but it doesn't feel like a pipe dream to me anymore. So
Yeah.
anyway, I see this analogy to basically like the constraints in the system have shifted strongly. In one place, it's making review the bottleneck. In another place, it's meaning analysts are no longer the bottleneck, which is, yeah, just
Yes.
like really interesting.
Yeah, but I think the new bottleneck is again like structuring this knowledge, so everything will be grounded.
Totally. Yeah. 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 Because like the reason why a lot of previous data democratization efforts fell down is if everybody could just kind of hit Looker or hit, Metabase or whatever people were using,
Yeah.
it was very predictable. Like you open the tools up, you let everybody use them. And then about 3 to 6 months later, you would have 9 different definitions of churn and endless arguments about like, how do we actually define our metrics as an organization? But now like the metric definition part, I wouldn't say it's a solved problem, but it's a solvable problem. If you build the right infrastructure, the right skills,
Exactly.
the right
Exactly.
views, you can solve it.
I totally agree. And I think this in that manner, AI like really enable us to dream further and really believe in this data documentation idea. So I think it's connect me very good to the next question of how do you think the need to knowledge base affect traditional data team? And the reason that I'm asking, we thought in the past data team was focused on structured data, wrote data pipelines, get expectation test, models. But now there is this new notion of knowledge. This is unrelated at all to the classic data pipeline. But when you are looking at that from an organizational perspective, the data team is the one that, in my opinion at least, needs to be in charge on this knowledge because like he is the central place that collect all the different raw data that you need to curate it in order to create this knowledge base. So where do you see those data team in the future?
I agree with your vision of like what data teams should be doing. I think it may be a struggle for a lot of teams. And the reason is I think a lot of data people have defined themselves in terms of their technical skill set. Like I'm really good at writing SQL, or I know how to run a regression analysis, or maybe, I'm good at building pipelines in Spark or something like that. And those technical skills, I don't think they are completely commoditized yet, but AI is definitely making a lot of them a lot faster and easier. And I think there's always been a split between data teams that define themselves either in terms of their technical prowess or in terms of their value to the business. And I think now it's kind of becoming an existential thing. You've got to justify the value of the team to the business. And if you can be the trusted team within the business that helps people get up, like solve the gnarly, complicated organizational alignment questions of agreeing on definitions and kind of like building that information architecture together, then you can be hugely, hugely valuable because suddenly agents are your consumers and, you're playing a really important, valuable role. But yeah, I think it's a mixed bag. I think some executive teams have just not been willing to let data teams play that role. And I think there are a lot of data teams that have not thought of their role in those terms. I think basically
Yeah.
it's time to like step up and think of yourself as kind of a crucial player within the business organization. And the technical side, like it remains important, but it's a means to that end. It's not the primary reason that you exist.
Yeah. And first of all, super interesting. And I think that we are continuing the line from, and I talked on this with Shachar in our previous episode, between like the days that like the data engineers was DBAs, is they need to think about indexes and storage to the point
Mhm.
that they thought on more abstract models and DBT objects. And from that time, like over this, I think almost 20 years, the technology part just shrink and the business size just got bigger and bigger. And right now we are going to see the extreme of that. And it's happening to data engineers. It's also happening to software engineers. Like it's happening to all the industries that the technical part is not the bottleneck most of the time anymore.
I
So
think that's right. Yeah.
yeah. So I think this is very interesting perspective to think about the new age data team as the judge of the organization. This is basically how I infer what you said, like needs to get into disagreement between different um, people, different team, different department on what is right and what is not right and encapsulate that in this knowledge base.
Yeah. It's a little bit like the role that finance teams play in many organizations, where they
Okay.
become kind of like the auditor and the arbiter and the kind of like final deciders
Mhm.
of like what's really worth the investment. And I think there are good things and bad things about it. But at the end of the day, most organizations, large organizations especially, need something centralized like that. I think most CFOs orgs are not equipped to do what we're talking about. I think there's a much deeper layer of like really, really understanding how the product works, how the service is delivered, that I think data teams are better positioned for. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think it does end up being that like kind of
Yeah.
auditing role that you described.
Yeah, I agree. But to be honest, I think that the technology is still not there yet. I think that the technology part needs to be a bit more abstract. Like today, data team still needs a lot of technical skills. They need to still know and there is a lot of bottlenecks in this autonomous data engineer concept.
Right. Like we're not fully there yet, but yeah, I think I flipped in the last 2 years of thinking, oh, we're going to plateau and it's going to be a long time before you have agents kind of performing anything close to whole human roles. Like it's going to take years to get there. It's not going to happen right away, but I think the writing's on the wall. I think agents are going to be able to perform a lot of the technical work within the next few years. So, it does, like, you still have to write SQL today. You still have to commit stuff and push code. Um, I'm planning for a future where most of that is delegated to agents, and it's this higher level of thinking and reasoning and consensus building within an organization that becomes the valuable skill set.
So for me, I feel very comfortable with that. I think that the technology is really evolving super fast. Everybody is amazed on where it is today, but uh, it is interesting to think how it really ends up for those teams. As you said, like the teams that will succeed to elaborate, dispatch themselves from the technical identity and transition to more business-oriented thinking are the ones that are going to really stay and affect the business.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing that I wouldn't want to lose there is I think that the technical thinking gives you a rigor of being able to take apart problems and kind of build logically coherent arguments that, like, it's not like that's unique to software people or unique to data people, but doing that technical work really flexes the muscle
Yeah.
and teaches you certain patterns. And so, even if that's not writing code, even if that's surfacing in how do you think about how to build the right metrics, or how do you think about which teams to get on board when, I think that skill set is still useful. It's more of a, it's, I'm blanking on the word.
Yeah.
But like a very technical, what is the word I'm looking for?
Don't ask me that. This is not my expertise there, to be honest.
Unfair question. Critical thinking. That's what I was going to say.
Critical thinking.
Like really well-grounded critical thinking.
Yes.
I think data people tend to be very good at that. I think that'll be valuable. It's just going to be expressed in different ways over time.
Yeah. So last question for our podcast today. What will be the effect of the business? This is what matters. Like knowledge base is not interesting. What is interesting is how it's going to affect and change how our business is operated.
Yeah. I mean, I think the prize here is getting to a place where humans and agents can really successfully collaborate. And this is the thing I could just nerd out about forever because
Love that.
like, I think human collaboration it's more art than science right now. It's not like, it's very hard to replicate a good collaborative culture. Yeah. It's very hard to like really, really zero in on what makes it work. There's this like specific type of very human chemistry. And now we've got this new type of intelligence that like has different strengths and different weaknesses and can scale up infinitely as long as you can pay for the tokens, and can work much, much faster in certain places. But it's also totally idiotic at some things that are obvious to people most of the time. Like we barely understand collaboration among humans. And now we're mixing in this new type of intelligence, and you've got to get it to perform well. I think the organizations that figure that out are going to live on a totally different plane than the other ones. And I just can't see any way where that would work without something like a really well functioning, well curated knowledge base. But exactly what that means, I think, is still, we're unpacking it right now.
I love this analogy, I have to say, to think about your knowledge base as your organizational culture, because this is like organizational culture, how you think between different people that work on different tasks. So, and this common ground between those people are the culture. And this is exactly the things that we try to get in this knowledge base. And what the state of the organization, that is the aggregated knowledge of each one of the operators in this organization. So I will be careful to say that we will see that an organization with good culture is going to mirror to good knowledge base that will really help them to use their own human to human culture in their human to agent interaction.
I think that's right. And like, well, to take it a step farther, like just because you have a really good culture now doesn't mean that it's going to be adaptive for the world to come. So like in general, I'd much rather be building from a good culture than a bad culture. But I just don't see any possible world where we introduce a whole new kind of intelligence to our organizations and it doesn't change the like organizational laws of physics that make things work. So like there are teams running experiments on things like, can you superpower an engineering manager so they can now manage 30 people instead of 5 or 6 or 8 or whatever
Yeah,
was the rule of thumb before? Maybe that'll completely fall on its face. But if it turns
yeah,
out that
mhm.
that works and you can have flatter organizations because of it, like, okay, the laws of physics just changed. Um, so yeah, I think good culture will breed good evolution in culture, but it's going to have to evolve.
Maybe I think about that like good, like in the future, good culture means good knowledge base because it's mirror one another in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, one level that I like really strongly agree on is I think a good knowledge base is going to make culture legible, right? In the past, culture was basically like is almost entirely invisible to people outside a company and even to like managers or people working within the culture. At best, you could kind of see what your team was doing and maybe, one layer up, where one layer down, your neighbors in the organization. But like as a whole, the culture is mostly this invisible thing happening around you. Now, all of a sudden, our skill files, like you can diff skill files. And I don't think we're at this stage of practice yet, but I think we're going to get to the point where we start to be able to measure those and say like, some of these are better than others, right? Some of the organizational habits that we have, like they're not just different, like they are more performative.
Amazing, Abe. A quick takeaway from my side, at least, and I'm sure that the audience will love to comment their own takeaways. First of all, the knowledge base is the foundations for the new evolution of AI. Without it, it's garbage in, garbage out. You cannot really leverage the model without it. So my takeaway from this episode, first of all, and knowledge base is the base for the new evolution of businesses when they want to leverage AI without that garbage in, garbage out. Secondly, it's going to affect each person in the organization, but especially on the data team, that will shift their role from technical role to more judge inside the organization that will decide what is right and what is not right. And lastly, we can think about the knowledge base as the enabler to agent human interaction. This one thing that synchronize all the organization and let it operate in an autonomous way. This is what I take. Thank you so much, Abe, for being here.
Yeah. Thanks, Ida. This has been an awesome conversation.
All right, that is a wrap. So again, huge thanks to Abe for bringing the insight and keeping it real. If you enjoy this, follow the Data Splash podcast. We have got a lot more coming your way. Until next time, keep your data flowing and we will see you in the next stream.